Welcome to Friday night's video in our Master Series. This is the 115th video in our Master Series and the first video in our group processing. So really quick, hopefully that everything that I tried to show you, as simply as possible so that it's not 500 videos. We're at 115 videos right now, and I hopefully that should set you to where you can understand that how simple that the mixing process is, but the things that you need to take into consideration, what's going to make you come out with a good mix or a bad mix is how well you relate to those things, how well you apply those things, and how well you learn to get good taste and make good judgments about things, which just comes from experience and listening to good music, listening to good music and being able to hear when you're doing something well and when you're not. And if you take all those things into consideration, you should be able to come out with a pretty good mix. You had a pretty good recording. You had, all the way through up to the mixing. So the mixing process is a problem because basically it revisits everything as you mix. And once you can get that in your head, that you will start to understand why really good mixing engineers are really good mixing engineers where other people are not, because they don't take those things into consideration, which seems very simple and at the same time can sometimes seem really complicated, but it very much will push you over the edge to becoming a good mixing engineer once you understand to really sit back and apply all those things and learn to do it well. So as we get into processing, basically we've gone to our limiting bus and we've basically got the mix done. We're down to about minus 3 dB, somewhere around there, to give ourselves a little bit of headroom, and we want to do our final stage processing. Now I'm going to walk through this with you. I've set up the processing in this video to be a little bit differently than I normally do. Normally I've got a few more buses on there for analysis, and normally I've got a clean mix bus and a raw bus that basically is unprocessed. That's going to skip all the processing buses, go to the main bus that's going to the main out, both of those two buses, the mono and the raw bus, because from the leveling bus it'll go ascend to both of those buses to the main bus that's on the other side of all of the processes we're getting ready to do, because in some situations I'll blend them in, but it'd be very difficult to sit here for the most part. Most of the time I have to worry about it. A lot of times it's some really complicated mixing things that I try to do in some very unique situations to try to get an effect done that we're not going to worry about. And I've changed it up just a little bit to simplify it so that you can get a good mix done. When you run into some other stuff and some wild stuff, I do some pretty wild processing sometimes in some very unique situations. And to go through all of them in this series, we'd have 5,000 videos. So we're not going to do that. My next series, I'm going to go through talking about movie scores and things like that and all the different things you can do. But in this series, we want to get a good mix done. Like we've got a band. We've got a band, and we want to get that band mixed well, right? So that Whitney Houston can go on to radio after you record, mix, and master her stuff, right? Okay, so that's kind of what we're shooting at. So the processing things are going to be set up a little bit different, and there's enough to keep you busy, don't worry. So I always preach about checklists and things like that and workflow. The workflow I'm going to show you is going to be very simplified. This is normally my workflow. I go through preliminary considerations that we've talked about, and then I go into my workflow. And normally I really preach go light on processing. You can always go back. Keep that in mind. Go light as you go through. You can always go back and add more. Does that make sense? So go light. You'll find that your stuff will come out sounding a lot cleaner, a lot better, and a lot, more audible, you know, things that are happening that are going on won't get muddied and lose clarity because of you over processing things. You know, worry more about doing a good job in your capturing and your, you know, first phase processing, your editing, and don't try not to over process things. Go light. You can always add a little bit more. Sometimes you will add a lot for effects, but remember, go light. You can always add more later. So basically, now you can make, this is basically where I start, okay, on my group processing. And this I change up now and then because I bounce around a lot of times depending on what kind of thing I'm doing. So, you know, you can make some notes about this, you know, stop the video and make some notes about what you're seeing here, you know, to help you get your own checklist going on, to help you, you know, get a workflow happening, because I always preach that, you know, to up to the end of this here, and, you know, make some notes about it so you can start getting your own checklist together in your own workflow. We're going to go through a pretty basic one to help you just get it done and cover most of the pertinent things that are going to be very important so that you could record in Mixmaster and you know, Whitney Houston, and it would come out fine as long as you did a good job of what you're supposed to do. You know, if you're going to do, you know, this huge movie score thing that, you know, is doing, you know, 15 different genres and, you know, symphony and everything else, that, well, but you might not be ready to jump into that yet. You know, it can get a little complicated and your workflow is going to get miles long, like mine is sometimes, you know. So, you know, it's like, just, we're going to try to focus on the basics so that you could do that. You know, you could record, mix, and master Whitney Houston and be done with it and be good to go. So I'm going to kind of work through a workflow with that. You make some notes of that. Listen to what I'm showing you when we're going through the processing. And then you'll start to work on your own. As you get better, it'll get more complicated. You know, and as it gets more complicated, it'd be very difficult sometimes for you to explain, you know, all the different situations that may or may not be applicable to, and you will understand that, and you'll really focus more on what are you trying to do, so I can teach you how to help you get done what you want to do. So in this series, we're really focusing on getting you a production done. Now, if you're going to do a movie score or something really complicated, it can be 15 different, 20, 30 different productions in a 2-hour span. Does that make sense? And it really can be. What you're going to have to take a lot of other things into consideration as you're working, which we will make another series after their series on that. So that ought to be really good. So anyway, when we get into here, another thing to remember is that no matter what I say, and if I don't repeat it when I'm going along, we are starting at this leveling bus. Now, these other buses that you had for metering that we talked about, you can just go ahead and remove them. You're not going to really need them anymore. Make sure that your FX buses, any of your FX buses, are routed to your leveling bus also. Does that make sense? So any other buses, all your buses and any FX buses or anything else coming off there, make sure it's all routed to the leveling bus, because it's going from the leveling bus to these buses in line, and then it's ending at this main bus that I have analysis tools on, and then it's going to the main out. So basically that's the setup you want. Now, for now, I mean, this is going to help you go through what you need to address, and it may get way complicated later. Some things you may not do as much, but it's a checklist to go through to make sure, do I need to check that? How is that? Is there a problem there? What do I need to worry about? So, and it'll make you check it at least to make sure. You might not have to worry about, you know, doing any type of noise reduction or mid-side work, or you might not have to do any reverberation or expansion or anything like that, but you want to check it. So anyway, that one of the things I really wanted to point out is that as we go through this, really remember when I talked about mixing, you go forward. You've done with this leveling bus, you're going to the saturation bus. Once you get that in, you step back to here. That means you go back and listen to that mix, and is it causing any issues? You know, do I need to go back to any of those buses? Do I need to go back to those separate tracks and make any adjustments? Once you've gone there, you go on to the next one. This one here, you get done with it. Once you're happy with it, you go back to the beginning. You know, it's like, you know, 3 steps forward, 1 step back. Now you go back to here. Is is there anything that now that I've added it in there on the separate bus or separate tracks that need to be adjusted? Then go back to this one. Do I need to adjust any of that after doing that? Does that need to be readjusted? Go back to that after I've done any readjustments that I may have done in there, back to that one that I was working on. Now do I need to readjust that a little bit? Okay, good to go. On to the next one. And then we check talking about noise reduction in this case, and we got that done with that. Now we go back here. Did that change anything? Did that change there? Did that change there? Do I need to make readjustments? Back to this one. Now do I have to readjust that one? And then on to the next one. Which sounds complicated, but if you work that workflow well, sometimes you might get to the point where you go back to this one and you're fussing with it, and you're fussing back with the original tracks and original buses and you know, fussing with stuff, you know, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like, yeah, maybe I might need to do just a little bit there. There, it took 2 seconds and I'm done. Sometimes it's just checking it, making sure. No, I'm going back now. No, I don't need to fuss that. Off I go. It took that long. Just to get your brain to think about it. Does that make sense? That way, because your brain gets going along and it's just going from one step to the next. Because I already did that. You know, I already did that. Why am I rechecking it again? Well, you're rechecking it because now it might have changed. Once you do something else to audio, that it's changed it. So that means that this back here might need to be changed to something else to make it work better, which means that this has to be readjusted. And then if you readjust that, that means this might have to be readjusted. And then when you get back here, by the time you get back to that one you're working on, well, now that I've did that, went back there and did that, now this one needs to be readjusted. Then I readjust that one again. Then I'll listen to it, and depending on how much I did, if something really needed to get readjusted, I might go all the way back to here and do it again. That might happen twice before I get back to my EQ bus and go, okay, now just a little bit there. Okay, good to go. Does that make sense? And then on to the next bus. That sounds complicated, but that type of a workflow will really help you. When you will spend a lot of time is where you need to. So just keep that in mind. So I'll see you in the next video when we actually get started on some processing. See you there.